Meltzer would write, the main event saw Angle and Tomko versus AJ Styles come out to face Nash and Joe. Joe was told by management to go out and do a promo to bury Scott Hall for no showing. Somewhere in the promo, which wasn't planned much ahead of time because nobody knew if Hall was going to come or not, the story is that Joe went off track and went into business for himself. The strange part, aside from the whole show building to the promo, was the signs of a Vince Russo worked shoot playbook, including telling everyone it's a shoot and looking at Dixie Carter and saying they could fire him if they didn't like it. Nash in the ring looked furious that he was getting buried in the promo. Joe's purpose by management was, because they thought the fans loved Joe as the babyface, to make it seem like it was Scott Hall's fault, and then build up and make people accept Eric Young as their third man. Joe's shoot promo, which would have torn the house down in Ring of Honor, didn't get over with his TNA fan base. It was a telling sign because Joe was critical of TNA bringing in quote-unquote superstars, and it was clear from the reaction of the live crowd that while they enjoy the action provided by the wrestlers who became names in TNA, they do see the old names and former WWE names like Nash as the real stars, even if they joke their way through the system and don't produce in the ring. Joe made a reference to himself as the best wrestler in the business, which is the deal that Paul Heyman would have his champions in ECW do, and Gabe Sapolsky had his champions in Ring of Honor do, to show support to their homegrown stars. But the fans didn't buy when Joe said that in the least. Fans also didn't accept Eric Young as the third man, as there's a big difference between an undercard comedy act who's out there for laughs being accepted in a pay-per-view main event. The speech went several minutes long, cutting the main event short. The match wasn't bad, but it was flat to the crowd. When Joe pinned Tomko with a muscle buster to win, it came off as a disappointing ending to a lackluster show. Shortly after the show was over, Joe and Nash had a near altercation. Meltzer gave the match a star and 3/4. Wade gave the match a star and a half. And as we know, something did happen. Here's the report. Multiple sources watching have slightly different stories, but the basic gist was that Joe was talking to Nash, still mad about how everything went down. Nash told him he didn't want to talk right now because he was mad and for Joe to leave him alone. Somewhere in there, Nash either pie-faced Joe, shoved him hard, or threw a forearm to the head. Agent Stilo Brown and Scott D'Amore broke it up. Nobody was yelling or screaming, and there were those who felt that Joe backed down, and there were those watching who felt that with so many people there, after already being in hot water for his promo, Joe would be risking his job, and that nobody did or didn't back down, and both wrestlers knew with everyone there it was going to be broken up anyway. Once again, this also sounds very reminiscent of how WCW tried to work the boys in angles, and TNA is in a position where they could want to shake things up, and Russo has gone this direction before with Jeff Jarrett. Still, several suspected it was possible. Those we talked about believe Joe really did go into business for himself and get untracked in that promo, and it killed the atmosphere for the main event. And what happened with Joe and Nash was frustration stemming from that, as opposed to an internet-based angle. And it's also written that the choice of Eric Young was a call that you made, and it was very much second-guessed because it didn't get over. And both would say, or Dave would say, both Booker T and Kaz were the most obvious choices, but they had just gone really hard in a 16-minute match. And you, Jeff Jarrett, didn't think it was fair to them. Lot to unpack here, man. Tell me about, before we talk about Eric Young, did you tell Samoa Joe to cut a promo?
So again, I was in the truck, and here is something that, man, I'd love to have our boy Keith Mitchell, because Keith, I would sit right behind him in the truck, in that the direction I gave is reality based. Russo's going to produce it. So Russo and Joe got together on that. But I remember saying, keep it short and leave it open-ended. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of meat on the bone. And the point about the impact zone, I don't say turn it on Joe, but not really digesting it. And look, and I don't want to get too off track here, but you start burying the guy who those people out in the crowd paid to see in the main event, that you kind of are spitting in the wind. So you kind of had to navigate that. But you had to get out. Scott's not here, and say a few words, but then build Eric Young up. And it just got misguided and way too long. And I could remember Keith and me going, how can we get word to him? And I'm like, it's too late. Joe's a performer and he's going down this road. You can't, it is what it is. But the reality is, what a growing process, because the Impact Zone, when you go back and watch this, they just did not buy the messaging. And look, I'll stand on putting Eric in there because Booker and Kaz were likely, and there were the few others that we could have put in there.
Why not you?
I wasn't ready. I don't even think I had my wrestling. I'd be almost willing to bet I didn't bring my wrestling gear. I know there was a consideration of just making it 3-on-2. That wouldn't have worked. I wanted to deliver some kind of match, and Eric was over, could get great responses from that Impact Zone. He just was that multi-dimensional character.
Yes.
that he could go and he could take that spot. But at the end of the day, it was really designed to keep it open even, but you got to give him a finish and roll on. This is one of those hypotheticals, what if, but I will be willing to bet that had that promo gone about a third as long as it did go, I don't think we would be, I don't think it'd be the main spotlight on 2007 and the Backstage altercation. That promo just went too long, and it was mixed messaging. You know, when you open up a sales email, Conrad, and you have a bunch of clutter and you miss the message, you don't buy. And I think there was so much mixed messaging. Okay, Scott's not here, but wait, Joe, you're telling me you're the best wrestler in the world, but wait, TNA, this promotion that we're backing, that's how we came for, they screwed up. There was multiple messages, and none of them got over. And mainly because it just went too long. Does that make sense about the email analogy? Way too much messaging, and he was burying the promotion, which in turn buried out the people in the audience. Said, hey, I left my house on a Sunday night to come watch you guys. Bury Scott, but don't bury the promotion. Any
heat on Joe when he comes back through the curtain?
It wasn't from me. I just knew that the story didn't get over. I stayed in the truck after the match was over, and me and Keith probably talked 10 minutes because I'm just like, man, what do you think? I would always do that. I'd get feedback, and maybe there was somebody who stopped me getting out of the truck, or maybe I had to meet folks. I don't remember I wasn't there on the altercation. I remember it. Everybody came and told me, but it was over and done with by that point. Well over and done
with. Bygones be bygones with Nash and Joe pretty quickly.
I think that night it was, if I recall correctly, there were tempers and they both are passionate about this industry, but to my recollection, it wasn't any long-term, we got to worry about them being in the same building the following night. None of that.